Lights are green. Careful what you say now.
Call to order. The time is 7 p.m. on Monday, February 3rd, 2025. I'd like to call this Heritage Advisory Committee meeting to order. We will need a vice chair. In the case that I'm not here, you get to be chair. And Linda will give you a script. So it's easy. So are there any nominations? And you can nominate yourself. John, you're an old hand at this. Would you do the honor of being the vice chair?
Is that a request or?
Would anybody else like to have the position?
I would nominate Bob.
You would nominate Bob.
I second.
I'll bow to John if he wants it.
Okay, gentlemen, decide between the two of you. Who wants it the most?
So,
Well, you could be, are you going away, John?
when?
Have you already gone away this winter?
This winter? No, I'm looking forward to going over to the UK. But it won't be till later.
Okay, is it possible to nominate two vice chairs? No. We should have one.
I'll tell you what, I will volunteer to be
Thank
the
you.
vice chair
Thank you.
for 2025.
Oh, okay.
Or is it just for this one meeting?
No,
No,
for 2025.
okay, fine.
That's great.
Yes, I will
Thank you, Bill.
get Bob
That's sweet.
off.
And then
of
Bob
this.
can take over. Okay, so I will need a second for that. Oh, we don't. Well, thanks anyway. Okay, so,
Speed.
no, I do. It says I need a mover and a seconder. Oh, that was just for the nomination. Would anybody else care to be nominated or to serve? Okay, I do not. Thank you, Linda. So we need a mover and a seconder to make you vice chair.
So move.
Bob. You started this
Sure,
off.
I'll second.
Okay, all those in favor. And Linda, we need to say that the vice chair is appointed for 2025. Okay. This is all those in favor. That's why I need Linda here. I'm a terrible chair. Okay.
Can I leave now?
Stuck here, man. Okay, this is important, the land acknowledgement. The town of Aurora acknowledges that the Anishinaabe lands on which we live and work are the traditional and treaty territory of the Chippewas or Adjournment Island, as well as many other nations whose presence here continues to this day. As the closest First Nation community to Aurora, we recognize the special relationship the Chippewas have with lands and waters of this territory. They are the water protectors and environmental stewards of these lands, and as a municipality, we join them in these responsibilities. We further acknowledge that Aurora is part of the treaty lands of the Mississaugas and Chippewas, recognized through Treaty 13, as well as the Williams Treaties of 1923. A shared understanding of the rich cultural heritage that has existed for centuries and how our collective past brought us to where we are today will help us walk together into a better future. Let it be. Okay, may I have somebody to approve the agenda?
Move.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you. Are there any questions or comments about the agenda? This is the revised agenda for tonight. Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed, that carries. declarations of pecuniary interest. I'm just going to assume that there are none here. Yeah. This is the receipt of the minutes from the Heritage Advisory Committee meeting of December 9th. Now, Linda, is it only people that were at the meeting that could? Okay, so just a receipt of the meeting minutes of December 9th, moved by, thank you. Seconded, got that? All those in favor? We have one delegation this evening, Christopher. If you want to come to the table, you're welcome to do that. Make sure you got a mic.
Yep, there's one.
There's one there. This is the Aurora Armoury Provincial Plaque. Thank you, Christopher. You can continue.
Yeah, let's wait till Linda pulls up some slides. So yes, it's nice to see some council representation back at this committee. And yeah, it's going to be about the Aurora. So the Aurora Armoury has obviously been in the news last month about its usage and stuff. I'm more interested in the provincial plaque that sits outside because it has kind of been neglected by a whole bunch of different entities and people, and it really needs some attention. We get to the next one. So I'm going to kind of go through a little bit of history and kind of a little bit of some action items to deal with this. So in 2007, the DND worked with the Ontario Heritage Trust and erected this plaque. And obviously the town purchased the Armoury in 2014. And when they did, they actually inherited this plaque. It was doors open 2015 I was on, and the Armoury was actually one of the listed venues. And while viewing it, there were a couple people milling around the Armoury plaque sign. And when I spoke to them, they were questioning. They said, oh, is this actually a live Armoury? Because the Armoury plaque actually states that it is the home of. So I think immediately there, you had people that weren't familiar immediately get thrown off by the plaque. And I was like, oh, well, I guess that needs to get corrected. Can we go to the next slide, Linda? So I got a hold of the Ontario Heritage Trust and I said, you know, in your 2006 documentation, it says the Ontario Heritage Trust is responsible for these plaques. And they came back to me, they said, well, that has changed somewhere in 2010 or something, that it's actually the placeholders that have the plaque are responsible for them. So I took that up with the planner at the time, which was Jeff Healy, and he understood that, worked back with the Ontario Heritage Trust, and in 2015 brought it to this committee. The committee actually went through this item and determined that what should happen is the plaque should get a correction, but they decided to put it on the pending list for this committee, pending the change of the Aurora Armoury. So if we can go to the next slide. And I guess we already know what happened with that Armoury. It went through a lease agreement and stuff. But even before that, what was happening at the Ontario Heritage Trust side is in 2018, they did a full review of all their plaques. I don't know what they're finding of this plaque, other than they already knew that there was an issue because it was brought before them in 2015. But in 2018, the town went through this exercise of right beside the Armoury, putting up a whole pathway to the Queen's York Rangers, all the time where the plaque is still in error. And just recently, we've observed the 150th anniversary of the Aurora Armoury, plaque still in error. So what I'm trying to emphasize to you is it's been 9 years, 4 months with absolutely nothing accomplished with regards to this after it's been brought to committee's attention, staff's attention, and there is an action to basically roll something forward on it. Can we go to the next one? So I don't think we can leave it this way, because if you look at the purpose and the particulars on the Ontario Heritage Trust website, it talks to being an accurate organization in their deliverables, which this is not. The town's official plan, if you look at it, actually talks to having a high standard of heritage conservation. This is not complying with that. But regardless of the physical plaque, what happens is if you leave it like this without any kind of attribution in the digital world, is the Veterans Affairs section, the federal government website has the plaque inscription verbatim. There is no note for correction of it. Ontario Heritage Trust, even though it's been brought and they're aware of it, even though they've done their 2018 review, still nothing. The most accurate part of this is Wikipedia. So bizarro world upside down. I get it. We're living in weird times, but I just think that if the least that could be done while this is being sorted out is the digital footprints get corrected, because they're just allowed to propagate. So the next one. So what I'm here to ask the committee is, you have to observe that this town has been, or this plaque has existed in town in error longer than it has actually been accurate. So the wording that I've extracted from the Wikipedia makes a lot more sense if it just refers to being the former home of, and that should be the change request. There is no advantage to putting this on a pending list outcome of another use of the Armoury, because the current use of the Armoury has no place on this plaque. This plaque is talking about heritage and history with regards to its past use. So I'd like the committee to see that this kind of moves up, and now we have council representation. The direction is to staff that it gets corrected. I've noted and flagged that the Heritage Fund has sufficient funds for looking after a plaque of this nature. I think when back in 2015, when I inquired, they had said about $5,000. I assume it's double of that, but it needs to be done. And then also that the digital footprints get addressed, and that as this is happening, that there is a clear communication back to all of us, community, council, committee, as to what's happening, when it's happening, and when it's going to finally be resolved. I'll just leave that with the committee, and happy to answer any questions.
First, we'll have a mover and a seconder to receive the delegation. I'm going down this way. Would you like to move this?
They're not,
The answer is yes.
Member.
it has to be,
It has to be a member. Of course, you can't do this.
or Cynthia.
I
I
move it.
forgot to go around the table. Okay, thank you so much.
No
Mover,
problem.
seconder. Okay, boss. Thank you. Are there any questions for the delegate?
I actually have a question, if you don't mind.
Of course.
So through you, Mr. Chair, or Ms. Chair, I should say. I'm just wondering, the information that's on Wikipedia, sorry, I'm putting on my researcher hat now. The information that's on Wikipedia, there's no way of knowing where it came from. Do we know what the sources are for that information?
Thank you.
So if it wasn't clear, that the change on Wikipedia is singular wording to say former. So currently on the plaque, it says it is the current home of. Wikipedia has seen that as being the problem and replaced it with former. So that's all I'm
So-
suggesting, is if a new plaque
Okay,
is
so it's just
created.
that word.
Yeah, correct.
Let's just use that word. Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions? John?
I'm assuming what you put up there was accurate from Wikipedia, but I see Queen's Rangers, it's labeled as the first American, not Canadian registered.
I didn't change that aspect. of
Okay,
it.
I'm just curious that why would they call it the first American regiment, but unless it was North America rather than first Canadian regiment?
My understanding was first Canadian. Adam, do you have any information on this, or can you find out?
Yeah, through you, Mrs. Chair. So, Ms. Chair, Chris brought this to my attention recently. I thank him for that as well. And since that time, I myself have reached out to the Ontario Heritage Trust directly, because first and foremost, I want to, confront them and make sure it's corrected. I recognize that some of that history in 2015, and whether the trust says it's our property or ownership now, sure. At the same time, they are the actual creators of those plaques. And if we do want a new one created, I respect the idea of potentially utilizing a heritage reserve fund, but if there's also a mechanism to have the OHT pay for it, I think that's something that should be explored as well. And in terms of correcting anything that needs to be corrected, we'll make sure the wording is done so in a manner that's thorough and effective, whether that be what Chris presented here or any other issues as well.
Okay,
And sorry, John.
no, I'm just saying fine, otherwise we could be the 51st state.
I can actually, through you, Ms. Chair, I can actually provide you with the history of that. It was because the regiment was originally formed of British loyalists during the American Revolution who moved up to Canada. So they're not actually an American regiment, but they're called an American regiment because they came here from the US, essentially.
Thank you. Yes,
One question through you, Mr. Chair. When the plaque was erected originally, were the Queen's York Rangers part of that armory? And then they moved
Yeah,
out.
so the dates, the dates that will be shown is 2007 plaque went up, D&D was attached. Somewhere in 2011, 12, somewhere in that kind of range, they kind of decided to jettison themselves of the armory and go through a disposition process. 2014 was the town picking it up.
thank you. And if you would check that, because I'm pretty sure that was done during Phyllis's council, which ended in December 2010. So would you just check on the dates? Well, Chris, you've been to council, you've alerted. Thank you very much. Adam, would you email the committee and let us know what you found?
Yeah, most certainly. So I have already emailed through Ms. Chair. I have already emailed the Ontario Heritage Trust. This has just happened recently.
Okay,
They're going to follow up shortly. I will be nagging them and proceeding to,
so would you be igniting them?
nagging them to perhaps even have a in-person meeting or whatever the circumstance may
Yeah.
be. Just to sort of exactly the details of this delegation, whether it is first and foremost, we know it needs to be corrected, but then the actual process of having a new blue plaque created
Yes.
on whose dime and how that would look. Any information I receive, I would report back to this Heritage Committee.
And this is a very important heritage structure to Aurora, so want to make sure we get all of the information correct about American, Canadian, because I think a lot of people think it was totally Canadian, so. Bob, do you have any knowledge on this? No. Okay.
Nothing different.
Okay, so
For sure.
we want to get it right.
We will. Yeah, we will.
Okay, great.
One more comment. I think the American needs to stay. I think they are referred to as, yeah, I don't think that that's something that needs to be revised on the plaque, right?
Just so you know, you actually have a resource right here that can probably answer it
Okay.
for you, so you don't have to keep going around. But perhaps Jeremy can.
Yeah, sorry, through you, Mr. Chair. I'm the curator of the Queen's York Rangers Regimental Museum as well. The first American is accurate when they were raised in 1770s under named for Queen Charlotte, the Queen Consort of King George III. They were a loyalist, the first loyalist regiment raised to defend the colonies against the rebels, the American rebels, and so they are the first American regiment. That's a name they reinstated when the Queen's Rangers were reinstated in the 1920s. Sort of along with, there's a very complicated history, and some of it is just on the wall out there.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
very
It-
nicely done too, yes. Thank you. Okay. All those in favor? Well, the motion is, do we have to make it a motion? Should we make it a motion? Is that,
I'm already proceeding through you, Mrs. Chair, with conversations with the Ontario Heritage Trust. We can just we would receive it, and then I will report back to the committee, likely by our next meeting even. For a status update to be next to report back on that.
okay, how about, we receive the information from Christopher Watts and refer no. No, but see, this is the problem. I want it to be well, is it going to say what we talked about? It's going to say what Christopher's delegation was about. Okay, then motion to receive the information from the delegate. All those in favor? Thank you. Thank you. We see you on the screen. You're
Chris?
Chris. This is our watchdog in a good way. Okay. And going on to matters for consideration. This is about Happy Woodland Pet Cemetery. There's a lovely movie that was shown at the new theater at the town square. It's a story that is continuing. So, Michelle, I think that you would be the person who would be speaking about this.
Through you,
That
Mr. Chair, I can introduce it just as a
Okay.
formality's sake. It is a
Yes,
it is a
good.
heritage permit application that we're dealing with.
Okay.
Simply because this site was designated, and as a designated property, it now has to formally go through the process of a heritage permit.
Okay.
The designation, as you're aware, occurred over the past year, and with that in place under the Ontario Heritage Act, any site works or any alterations to the site, we recognize this isn't necessarily our typical physical built residential structure, but it is still a designated property, and as such, any site works and alterations are subject to our review and our comments. And there are a number of aspects listed in the memo itself for the site works at the Pat Cemetery. That includes, pathway reconstruction, monument restoration, landscape maintenance, and then addressing problematic monuments. And of course, with me here today is Michelle and Jeremy, and Michelle does have her presentation to go through that in detail. And then just for the committee's expectations here, we certainly want comments on all that is presented here today, as this will then be proceeding to council for ultimate approval of that heritage permit.
Thank you, Adam. Michelle? Or Jeremy, who's going to?
I have the presentation here. Linda, would you like me to share it? Okay. Good evening, everyone. My name is Michelle Johnson. I'm the Collections and Exhibitions Coordinator with the Town of Aurora and the Aurora Museum and Archives. I'm joined tonight by my colleague, Jeremy Hood, who's the Museum Collections Technician, as well as the Curator for the Queen's York Rangers, as you just heard. This presentation will provide a higher level overview of the Heritage Permit Application HPA 2025-1, which is focused on the Happy Woodland Pet Cemetery. Here's a quick agenda for the presentation. I'll provide a summary of the site and then go a bit deeper into items requiring alteration, including the pathways, monument relocation, restoration, the problematic monuments, and landscape maintenance. So the site overview. To physically orient yourselves to the site, attachment 2 of the memorandum shows an aerial overview of the parcel of land that we're discussing. So that land contains the Happy Woodland Pet Cemetery. And if you look at the map, it's a strange shape. So the rectangular portion of that map is the pet cemetery proper, and it's about a ½ acre. So some quick historical context, because this is a lovely story, and I'll share a little bit about it whenever I can. Victor and Anne Bloheen purchased this property on Yonge Street in the late 1920s and constructed a stone house that they named Silverdale Farm. The property featured Ben Karakin kennels, a silver fox ranch, an apartment house that contained 1,600 hens and chickens, and they were devoted animal lovers. So they reserved a place on this property for their pets to be buried, which became known as Happy Woodland Pet Cemetery. The first animal to be buried there was Archie, a dog that was owned by Victor and Anne. It wasn't long before friends of the family were also asking to bury their beloved pets in this tranquil setting. So over the past couple of years, town staff have successfully mapped this site and its features using a variety of tools. So the image you see here, it's one section of a specific map that quite literally pinpoints all of the burials and the features in the Happy Woodland Pet Cemetery. So each dot is a grave or a demarcated feature or something else that was worth noting. So the whole site has been GPS mapped with all the features pinpointed within 1 to 3 centimeter accuracy. And as we know, the site was designated, like Adam mentioned. So future alterations are to be reviewed by this committee and receive council approval. So the first item requiring alteration is the system of pathways located within the cemetery and along the perimeter of the cemetery. So many of the original path stones have been recovered and restored. That's what you see here. This is quite literally the results of our team probing and digging up these rocks, placing them where we found them, buried within the earth. And beyond that pink piece of tape, that's land that wasn't yet cleared of the invasive weeds, but it is now. And so it continues on to more of the pet cemetery. This pathway reconstruction will be a combination of fieldstone demarcations like you see here, as well as a permeable non-invasive foundation, which would ensure stability in the site and around the perimeter while complementing and preserving the aesthetic. So the reconstruction and restoration of these pathways is our immediate next step to continue restoration. The next item requiring alteration is the relocation and restoration of monuments. There are approximately 140 monuments that were relocated to a certain section of the property during the later years of operation. These monuments should be redistributed throughout the cemetery in a process that will be informed by our GPS data and other available tools. This image shows some of the stones that were moved from their original location. It's quite literally a sea of stones. There's no pathways between them. It's a big pile, a single layer pile. And also informing our process for how this area should look is archival footage from 1966 that shows all these monuments. The archival footage from 1966 shows a glimpse of this area without these monuments. So we know that in 1966, these monuments were not there. In regards to the repositioning of stones, the footage also shows some monuments standing up straight while others are laying flat, and we can actually read the names on them. So it's giving us direct evidence of how those stones should look as they were in situ back in 1966. The process of relocating these monuments can't meaningfully continue until we've determined the pathway system. So if we, for example, wanted to take the stone of Lady that you see in the bottom center and relocate it to an area that we found suitable based on some of our data, without knowing where the pathway system is, we could be relocating it to the center of what might end up being the most intuitive pathway system. So before we can move these monuments, we need to finalize and have a good understanding of how that pathway system will work. Within the site, there's 6 monuments that feature discriminatory epithets or racially offensive language. Our recommendation for these problematic monuments is to remediate them through a variety of approaches. Our proposed approaches include, there's a few different options. One of them is replacing the original monument with a modified replica. There's one instance, for example, where a stone is missing, it's broken off, but we have a photo and a newspaper article that shows the stone in its full state. And the name on that stone is one of these discriminatory terms. So if we go to recreate that stone, we would recreate it without including that language. And if the best case of action is to recreate a stone and use a replica, it would be done without the language as well. Another approach is to re-engrave the blank side of a monument with a modified inscription and then lay the problematic side face down. And the third option is to remove the language outright through rather invasive sandblasting. That's not our preferred option and would be used sparingly. We have found other examples in the United States and the United Kingdom of organizations and city councils who have taken action to remove the same language from human and animal monuments. So if the committee would like additional information about those examples, I'm happy to elaborate. And the final form of alteration to the site that we're proposing is landscape maintenance and design enhancements. So the pet cemetery is unique in so many ways, including the very serene location in the middle of a forested area. After decades of neglect, that presents its own challenges, including tree pruning and servicing, landscape improvements, adding permanent seating, add interpretive signage so that we can properly tell the story of the pet cemetery. And of course, we want to make sure it's accessible, safe, and capable of sharing these stories in a well taken care of way. We do have some concerns about, you know, keeping the site safe. And one of the best ways to do that is to make sure it looks taken care of and make sure people know that people are using it and watching it and caring for it. So those landscape enhancements, design enhancements would increase the user experience by being able to have a place to sit, as well as the very basic act of pruning trees that don't necessarily need to be there. Thank you for your time, and I look forward to further discussing the presentation and the application.
Thank you very much for a very interesting presentation. I need a motion. Have we already done that? Sorry. We didn't make the motion. I need a mover and a seconder to receive this so that we can have discussion about it. Sean Green is moving it. Thank you. So questions and comments, John?
2 questions. First of all, are there any other pet cemeteries like this in Ontario that you're aware of?
Not to this age, so not as historic as ours. The Happy Woodland Pet Cemetery is the oldest in Canada.
This is the oldest in Canada.
Yeah, we have reason to believe that that is the
Yes,
legacy. We haven't found it.
Now, are people, second question, are people able to bury pets now, or is that kind of closed and the cemetery is full?
That is a question that gets asked a lot, and it shows how enduring that connection is. Unfortunately, no, it's not an active burial site for pets now. But whoever wants to start a pet cemetery, I think would have quite a wide clientele. Very popular.
So if additional land was purchased by somebody, if it's available, could they start a new cemetery next door because it's a hallowed site?
With it being designated, I'm going to defer to Adam.
So it's for you, Ms. Chair. If you're talking an entirely separate parcel, you'd have to look at it from a wider lens of planning permitted uses then too, right? To be able to say it's an in effect pet cemetery would be a commercial, not to get too planning technical, but that would be a commercial operation, and a cemetery burial operation. There would be a whole set of requirements, and zoning requirements would be the biggest issue too. That's not at play with something like this, but if it were to become a more commercialized business, that's a different scope altogether. And that's not really part of this. Like this work is about the heritage side.
Question through you, Mr. Chair. I'm really happy to see the work going ahead on the pet cemetery. I think it's really important, and I'm really happy to see that. When you said a permeable pathway, like what, can you give me an example? Like what's the pathway going to be made out? Because it looks beautiful, like kind of, you know, I wouldn't want to see anything like concrete or.
Through you, Ms. Chair. That's one of the options we're looking at, more specifically as it relates to the perimeter of the site. So it would be like a technical term for it, not monogrid, but like a geometric plastic that would be installed in the ground, and then it would have gravel over top of it.
Oh.
It's very common to use in cemeteries, and it was recommended to us by the restoration consultant that we work with. That is quite a different look compared to the path stone option that you saw. That path, the field stone kind of more informal trail system is what is there already on the interior of the site. So we're looking to expand that to create more viewability of the site, so people can hopefully stay on the pathway and overlook a section of the monuments. Perhaps create a bit of an offshoot in certain areas for some permanent seating. The permeable foundation increases accessibility to some regards. So we are working with the Parks Department in coordination with their trail system development for that site to make sure we have accessible options. for the site, and that's one tool that might be used.
Thank you.
Question, if you don't mind.
Yes, of course.
Through you, Ms. Chair. So I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about the 4 to 5 monuments that had language that was deemed to be inappropriate. I'm wondering if, I'm assuming the answer to this is yes, given that you're a curator. The ROM, for example, has a First Peoples Gallery. What they've done is they've gone back to their exhibits and they've changed the narrative plaques around those exhibits to explain why the exhibits in 2025, or when they did it, which was a few years ago, are no longer reflective of what we now understand in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And when you said that there would be interpretive plaques explaining the site and its relevance and how it was maybe how it can be used, would that be information that you would consider including in that context so that people can appreciate that there were other sources there that in our present day understanding were not included because they're not any longer appropriate, but acknowledging that that change was made to reflect the day that we're living in, as opposed to trying to erase what existed before. So I'm wondering if that had been considered in terms of those narrative plaques.
And through you, Ms. Chair, that is something we are definitely considering as we document our work on the project. These steps will also be documented and it will live in context on the site. The extent of how much of that interpretive space will be used to describe that process is still being decided, but it will certainly be mentioned that those alterations were made and the rationale for them. One of the conversations we've had surrounding this and some lines of thinking say, should we leave them and give each one its own interpretive plaque? And one of the reasons we don't recommend doing that is we're creating a large part of our interpretive work around contextualizing these stones and perhaps paying them more attention than other individual stones. And is that the right use of our resources? So certainly including it in an overarching plaque or narrative about our process to make the site publicly accessible and what some of that looked like, yes.
Yeah, through you, Ms. Chair. So the Archives of Ontario at York University has a giant wall. It's a picture wall. It's basically a timeline just of images from before Ontario was Ontario to I think maybe 10 years ago. And there's a couple of images that are exactly what you're describing that the archivists felt strongly about including in the wall, but they had some problematic content. And so in fact, what they did, so this is something maybe to consider, they blurred the pictures so that you couldn't actually see them accurately, but they connected a QR code to those images so that if you wanted to understand why the change was made, what the original looked like, and the issues that exist given our present understanding of historical evidence, you have that opportunity, but the public in its front-facing view would not be exposed to that content. So they have a really good example of that at their main site at York University. So if you haven't seen it before, it might be worth having a look at because I think the content is important. It gives us a lot of insight into how people used language and our understanding of those labels during that time period in that context. And yet in 2025, we have a different understanding. So that ethical dimension in terms of historical thinking concept, I think, is important to reflect for those who are using the pet cemetery.
Thank you. And I think we could make note of that.
Okay.
But there would be other. Get offline. Thank you. Thank you. Bob.
What Cynthia has brought up is exactly my concern. I don't think it's appropriate to change history. So I would like to suggest for council's consideration, since they are the deciders and not us, a 3D. There's an A and a B and a C under part of number 3 on our agenda. It's page 7 of 62 or page 2 of 3. And 3D, what makes me think of it too is not all TVs maybe get in our house, it's channel 11, CHCH. And they broadcast a lot of old TV shows from the 50s or 60s. And at the beginning of each, they make a statement. And I would suggest leaving all of the signs, save some money, don't change history, but add one sign to indicate something like, and here's my statement, language used on some sites is indicative of the times and not condoned today. Language used on some sites is indicative of the times and not condoned today.
And this will be included in the report to when you come to council.
Yes, it will.
It's an option. And, yeah, thank you.
Through you, Ms. Chair. Yeah, so we are targeting coming to council in the next month with a rec report. Incorporating these comment though, and what Bob said too, we do want to have a consensus from the committee to some degree here, because that's exactly to Councillor Gardner's point. What we want to be able to relay, we can relay the discussion, but it would be nice to have a consensus.
Will Cynthia's comments be included as well?
They would be.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
I
I could
don't know if
add
we're allowed to
something.
make consensus.
And that's okay. That's okay.
I don't think we're allowed to have a consensus from our committee. We're only allowed to make comments.
That's,
And advise.
so we'll make sure that all the comments get represented.
Yes.
Makes sense.
Now, if this was just going to be a regular committee, would these comments appear in the minutes?
Yes. Yeah, these comments are in the minutes.
They would appear in the minutes that council sees?
I'm just pretty good at it.
Yeah, so that's.
Okay, because we did have a committee, the Traffic Safety Advisory Committee, that didn't have any of the comments. It said what the discussion was, but it wasn't fulsome. Anyway, I shall leave it in your hands. In your capable hands.
If I could just add one
Yes.
other thing, Ms. Chair, if you don't mind. So the term that keeps coming to mind, and again, I'm sure that people that are working in museums are very familiar with this term. The term is presentism. And it's something that those of us who are historians, people in history education, historiography, really grapple with. It's a real concern. But its definition is uncritical adherence to present day attitudes, especially the tendency to interpret past events in terms of modern values and concepts. And so I think that really is the tension that needs to be sort of digested and understood, because you absolutely don't want to create a public space that is going to be excluding anybody. But at the same time, you want to acknowledge the time period during which this place was created, and acknowledge the role that those opinions and those ideas and those attitudes had at that time. So I do think that it's been done really, really well in some contexts. That's why the ROM came up. They've done an excellent job with their First Peoples Gallery. The archives have done a great job. I do think there's a way of maintaining the historical accuracy and the historical evidence while still in a really sensitive, inclusionary way, showing people that we understand that today this is not how we memorialize, but erasing things. It's such a hot topic right now, and I think there needs to be an understanding of that tension that exists with the idea of presentism and how we can interpret things historically without applying our present day understanding of things in order to maintain the integrity of those historical objects and their significance. As people working in museums, there's not a doubt in my mind that you're very aware of this tension that exists.
Thank you for the comment. Adam?
Yes, through you, Ms. Chair. To you, Cynthia, just to have a point of clarification to Bob's former comments as well. Like, if you could clarify that, if, the intention is to leave as is and then have one centralized plaque, so to speak, with QR codes, is that kind of the vision that you would be okay with too, then, Cynthia, just to clarify that thought?
Yeah, I think that there's a lot lot of different ways of doing it, Adam, through you, Ms. Chair. I think there's a lot of different examples of how it's been done in a really sensitive, appropriate manner. But I think that's one option. The option of, I think one of the options was to lay the monument on its back so that the offending language was face down and couldn't be seen, and that the more modern version or the redacted version is what was facing people. I think honestly, maybe this is just me speaking as an educator. I think there's incredible opportunities for learning there to show people what existed originally and to then open up the conversation about why we don't use this language anymore. So a QR code is one way of doing that. I know the town of Stouffville is looking at QR codes with street names. So I think a QR code would be an easy solution. But I just think that it's important that that evidence exists in its original form, but that there's a deeper discussion around what those issues might be and how the town is trying to take steps towards modernizing our understanding of why we don't use that language any longer. So I think that would be a good option, but I think there's lots and lots of examples of that in different jurisdictions that, you know, I'm sure people have already seen in many cases. Those are the two examples that come to mind immediately.
Thank you. Adam is nodding his head continuously as you were speaking.
Yeah, thank you, Cynthia.
No problem.
Thank you. Are there any other comments or questions? So seeing none, I'll call for a vote. All those in favor, this is for a receipt. All those in favor? Am I right? Of receipt of the information and comments. Thank you. Thank you. Adam, it looks like you're next. Yes.
Thank you, Councillor. And through you, Ms. Chair, this next heritage permit application is for the restoration and remedial work being done to the Aurora War Memorial Peace Park and the Cenotaph. Specifically, there's the correcting of a misspelled name and a metal attribution, and then other overall enhancements to the park and conducting preventative maintenance as well. Similarly, we have staff as well here to answer any questions, but the material in this memorandum is a little bit more straightforward. There are supporting attachments as well, and then a pretty fulsome summary of the work and explanation of what is being sought through this heritage permit is provided on page 2 of that memorandum as well. But if there are any questions, we can certainly clarify.
Bob?
I just say thanks to all of the research. My goodness, it
Yeah, Jeremy.
looks so darn thorough. No, and it sounds all wonderful. I just wondered over time, if not immediately, will the street name Luxon be changed as well?
Yes, through you, Ms. Chair. Thank you for that question, Bob. And that's correct too. Through this exercise and through that recognition, that is on our radar as well. And through Marco, the director's delegated approval, that can be pursued and will be pursued. Yes.
Thank you. And before we go any further, I need a mover and a seconder for this motion. So thank you, Bob. Thank you. Are there any further comments about this or questions from the group? John?
I just have a question that goes back some time at previous discussions. I know this is about the war memorial itself, but when we discussed this subject last year, I'll say to be safe, there was a comment about the fence that surrounds the memorial. Was it adequate to prevent people running across and so on?
Right.
And I know at that time there was a request, or there was a statement to say, yes, don't worry, it will be looked after. Has there been any action at all on providing a more substantial fence railing or whatever?
You, Ms. Chair. So, John, are you referring to when we had the development application of the
Yes,
adjacent
yes,
lands?
yes.
Yeah, so that would be a condition of their approval.
Okay.
They have not received full approval yet,
Okay.
but once they do, that has been explicitly made a condition of site plan approval to erect a iron fence with landscaping as well. So both aspects.
Okay, so I know that just recently there's been a confrontation between Magna and they are the same developers, are they?
Through you, Mr. Chair, no, they're not. Magna is on Edward Street,
Yes.
245 Edward,
Oh, okay.
to the north. And I don't believe they're separate and distinct owner from the parcel to the south,
Okay,
directly abuts and what we saw.
okay.
So,
I'm just trying to get it in
yeah,
graphically in my
yeah,
mind.
for sure. But you are right, it is part of the promenade. And as we do see development applications, we bring them here for that exact reason. And we are aware of the necessary buffering to the site for sure.
Thank you. Thank you. And to the new members of the committee, John and Bob have been involved in Aurora Heritage for, I'm not going to say how many years.
We are artifacts.
So they have a lot of knowledge that some of us may not have. So thank you. Any other comments, questions? Okay, all those in favor of receiving? All those opposed? That carries. Linda, everybody raises their hand in approval. Then do I have to ask opposed? Okay. Okay. So it's process. We're moving on to informational items and we don't have any, so then you don't have anything else, do you? No?
I have some, I can add something on our new business.
Okay, so before you do new business, I'd like to go back to where I started before the meeting started. And just start with me and say why we want to be on this committee and who we are. I was appointed to this committee, but I have by choice been on this committee in the past. I find that it's a very important committee and I'm very glad to been asked to chair.
Chris Bolsonelli. I'm new to the Heritage Committee this year. Previously was on the Committee of Adjustment and I found that to be an incredible experience and was honored to be selected for this committee. And heritage is really important, I think, especially because there's so many different pockets of Aurora that folks don't necessarily know about, and to preserve that not only for the people who live there, but also those who might move here is quite special. And so that's why I would like to be, that's why I want to be on the committee.
Excellent. Good.
Rocco Martillo. I served half term, I believe, last year. I think it was about a half term. I just found the heritage area. We actually moved to the heritage area about a year and a half ago, and we were just enthralled in the whole process and the heritage upkeep of Aurora. I think it's very important. We're very proud of our heritage area. So when it just
Are you in the Heritage District?
correct, yeah,
That was hard come by.
yeah. It was a long process to get in. And I just feel it's very important. And now, I said, what better use of my time to try to put my input and my, my direction into the committee.
It's good to, and Bob lives in that area. It's good to have people on the committee that live in the area as well. Bob,
Thank you. I'm Bob McRoberts. I've been on the committee so long, I'm an honorary member. This is year 22. And just on behalf of the committee, Councillor Gartner, I'd like to welcome you back to the Heritage Committee. We were months without a council rep joining us, and kudos to Councillor Weiss. He does tend to tune in and listen to most of our meetings, and that's much appreciated. So welcome back. I live in the Heritage area district as well, just a block and a half or so from Rocco. Um, and have, I guess my grandfather moved to town 102 years ago, and we live in his house right now. So a number of routes in a number of ways.
Excellent.
Glad to be here.
Thank you. And just before we continue, I'd like to acknowledge Councillor Weiss. He tunes into many, if not all, of the committee meetings and works very hard. So it's nice to have you here, Councillor Weiss. Mr. Green, you're up.
Am I? Okay, you want some history?
Well, why do you want to be on the committee?
Oh, I
Which
would
it would be your history.
Yes, well, it's because of the historical nature of Aurora. I moved here from King, and I moved to King from London, England. Okay, that was a long time ago, and of course there are similarities, a lot of similarities with heritage there and heritage here as well. It's the same feeling, it's the same love for history, and history can teach us a lot of things. It really can. You know, don't make the same mistake twice, or because you did it then, it seems even better now. Or why did you do it then? Because, and now it can be understood. So this is the reason why history means a lot to me. And I look back, as Bob does, to my grandparents and what they did and what they went through and how it's been translated or looked at today. And being around for so many years, I've witnessed this rather than read it in a book. And so as long as I'm not losing any memory yet, I can appreciate the comparison about what people say today that have read the history rather than somebody that's experienced it. And it's very important that you understand it, how it really happened and why it happened. And so that's why history fascinates me. And I wanted to become part of, you know, an active group that that operates in the town of Aurora. That's my.
Thank you. Are you also sitting here as a representative from Hillary House?
Yes, I am the Heritage Advisory representative from the Aurora Historical Society located in Hillary House. And so what I do is after these meetings, and right now it kind of alternates. We meet on the Monday, and then Hillary or AHS meets the following Monday. So when we meet at Hillary House, AHS, on the agenda will be a report from John Green, the Heritage Advisory candidate.
Good. Thank you.
That's my chain of command.
And newly appointed vice chair.
I'll have to tell them that. They'll probably say.
I won't know what they're gonna say. Cynthia, and we have a very lovely picture of you in front of us. So now it's your turn.
Well, I hope it's the picture of me speaking to you and not some other picture, because God knows what that looks like. So I am now in my second term on the advisory committee. And if I had to tell you why I'm here, I think there's lots of reasons. First of all, I'm a history educator. So I've been teaching history for a large part of my career as a high school teacher, something I'm very passionate about. But a couple of years ago, I started a local history project with the city of Richmond Hill, which is where I grew up. Don't hold it against me. And then I recently moved to a school in Stouffville, where I've also been doing a local history project. And after doing the work for the city of Richmond Hill, I thought, you know, it only makes sense that as someone who lives in Aurora and is raising her family in Aurora and has a husband who's a teacher in Aurora, that I maybe learn a little bit more about the heritage and history of Aurora. And during that time, I also won the Governor General's Award for Excellence in Teaching Canadian History. So I've expanded my network, and I've realized that local history is, I think, key to getting people to care about history at all, and especially when it comes to young people. So my passion really is getting young people to engage with local history in lots of different ways. And so I come from a different angle, I think, than some of the other members on the committee. But I hear all these conversations, and immediately my thoughts are, how can we get young people engaged with the history of the town that they're living in? And I think there's lots of ways that that can happen. So that's one of the main reasons why I'm here. The other reason is quite simply, I really, really love civic engagement. And I think we can't really have an opinion about civic engagement if we are not ourselves engaged with civics. So that's another reason why I really felt strongly about being part of the committee. And I can say that as I'm not the newest member anymore, so that's exciting. But everyone's been very welcoming and very supportive and very patient with me as I have tried to learn how to navigate everything. But I'm really grateful to be on the committee for a second term. And I hope that one day I will be able to say what Bob said, and that I'm an honorary committee member when I've been on it for over 20 years. So we'll see if I get there, but I'm really pleased to be a part of this group.
Thank you. And I'm going to give you a bit of history, because in 2011, Bob McRoberts came to the town hall and he said, oh, I'd like to register for the Heritage Advisory Committee. And he was told that there wasn't going to be any Heritage Advisory Committee. And he got in touch with me, and I got in touch with the Heritage Planner at that time, who was wonderful. And I don't know what went on, but we have a Heritage Advisory Committee. So it's good that Bob walked in and found that out. Anyway, I think that's, we know who you are. And Adam, you wanted to speak to something?
New business, if you want to
Yeah.
move on to there. Yeah, so just under new business, Cynthia kind of already alluded it to. Maybe I'll even turn the floor over to you somewhat, Cynthia, just to say that the co-op project that Cynthia certainly spearheaded, I don't want to take much credit here at all, but that does seem to be coming more and more into fruition with a student lined up and placement essentially commencing right away. So that's an exciting opportunity for a local student to be engaged in our history as well. And Cynthia, feel free to add anything else, but that's definitely all credit to Cynthia.
Talk a little more
Thanks.
about
Through you, Ms. Chair, Adam, it's no, I can't take all the credit because it takes people saying yes. So I'll give a little bit of context to the project, and of course the committee members, I guess Bob and John now, who were there when we first had this conversation, will remember this. So the same local history project that I mentioned is doing with the city of Richmond Hill with the support of Mayor David West, and then the town of Stouffville with the support of Mayor Ian Lovett, bringing that project to Aurora. And we're going to be, given that I don't teach in Aurora, so I can't run it through my classroom, Adam and I had a very, I would say, very worthwhile brainstorm meeting in the spring, trying to figure out how to best launch a pilot of this project. And both of us realized, you know what, the best option is a co-op student, which actually I have to give Bob credit for, because he wrote a little note to me at one of the meetings and said co-op. And I thought, yeah, that's actually a great idea. So all that to say, there will be a co-op student from St. Maximilian Kolbe School, a grade 11 student. He will be starting with the planning department. The semester just began today, actually. So the co-op teacher will be reaching out to Adam. I put them in touch today to get all the logistics figured out, but he will be beginning his co-op placement with the focus of developing basically an overview of the heritage property that Adam has highlighted. Adam, remind me of the address. I know it's on Yonge Street. I know the building. I can't remember the address.
Yeah, I believe it was 15120, but
Yes,
this will likely be a
exactly.
suite of, over the course of the semester, an opportunity
Yes.
for them to get their feet wet and then keep expanding on their
Exactly.
portfolio with other
That's
works
right.
of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he'll be using primary sources. He'll absolutely be working with the museum. So you can expect that I will be sending you an email as well, figuring out how you can support him. But the whole idea is for him to create a profile of that property, so that all of these heritage properties that exist in Aurora, that, you know, it's a really extensive list, but they will be fleshed out as having sort of their own personality, their own history, their own identity, so that whether it's somebody just wanting to do research, whether that's genealogical research or just for, you know, personal satisfaction, or somebody wanting to purchase the property and know more about it, or even applying for permits, that body of research will be available. And he'll be focusing on things like the on-land registry, LACAC, census data, primary evidence like pictures and maps, fire insurance plans and things like that. So really excited that we can make this happen. And I will absolutely be looking for support from those who are in the know, because I will be supporting him with the history part. His co-op teacher will be supporting him with his co-op placement, obviously. And Adam will be signing off on confirming that he's actually doing what he's supposed to be doing while he's there, which I have no doubt he will be. And we have an excellent student. His dad is actually a history teacher that through nothing but good luck, it ends up being his child who, and I know this dad quite well, and he's an excellent history teacher. So this is, I couldn't pick a better student for this project. So we're really excited to get this pilot off and running, and hopefully it grows into something bigger for the town.
Sure. And yeah, the student will be in the planning department in an area essentially right beside me, and learning about the Heritage Act and the Heritage Planning process too. And if there's any questions from the committee, or even if there, I don't know what the student schedule would be like, but even if there's an opportunity to get involved in somehow with the committee, we'll give them a breadth of knowledge available to them.
That is for sure.
Thank you.
That's for sure that will happen.
So I would like to ask how this student was chosen. This was open to all of the high schools?
So
Yeah, it was an open call. Yeah.
yeah, so and what happened, just so that everybody understands, co-op is a course that students can take. Any student in grade 11 or grade 12 can take co-op. So not every student will be eligible if they didn't pick co-op, but for those who picked co-op, they're then placed in some sort of placement. And those placements have to be agreed upon by the employer and the school and the student and the parents. And then they end up doing their semester's worth of work at that location. So that's how it works. And St. Max is a perfect location given its proximity to Town Hall.
Mhm. Thank you. I just wanted to make sure that it was open to everybody
No problem.
and there was no favoritism involved. Thank you.
Actually, it's very hard to get placements and co-op students right now. So I was happy that we got one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I believe that. And does Jackie Stewart know about this?
Well, that was one thing that crossed my mind through all this too, as another resource, right? For sure, we can connect them and make sure
Yes, thank you.
they're in conversation.
Jackie Stewart has been around longer than is our. I don't know what we
Please
call her.
send me any names of anybody who you think can help, and I'll connect them.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I
I
don't,
would
I don't
appreciate
know. She's elderly. She'd probably hate me to say that, but very, very active mentally, and saw her a few years ago at the gym. I don't know if she's still there. Thank you. Adam, you know who she
Yeah.
is.
Better than Wikipedia.
Yeah.
Well, this has been, does anyone else have any more new?
Sorry, go ahead. As I arrived at the town hall this evening and walked here to this room, I passed by a sign I hadn't seen before, and it was announcing the availability of weddings here.
What?
Weddings,
Oh, yes. They've been doing
marriages.
that for quite a while.
Yeah, I know they've been happening, but I've seen that particular sign. Maybe I just, before I just had looking straight ahead this time, it just caught my eye. I think it's a new sign.
I didn't notice it walking in because I was tight for time, but it may just have been in a different place.
Could
And
be.
If we ever get Petch House off the ground.
Well, it
You're
caught
voted
my
against.
eye, and I was going to ask, all the discussions we went through with the Patch House, where it was nominated to be a venue for marriages rather than the council chambers, because the feedback at the time was people that got married in the council chambers felt it was a little bit too towny, like council, where the council meets. So the Patch House was suggested, and they agreed to spend, I think, $50,000
Yeah.
on upgrading the Patch House to allow this to happen. Can you tell me where has that progressed?
You know what? Can I suggest that, would you like to bring that back, unless you can just do it off the top of your head, because it could be a topic for,
Sure, I can bring it at our next meeting, only because I'd have to touch base with Robin McDougall's group in terms of facilities and in terms of what their timeline is or status is with that. As I said, that sign, I'm not familiar with it either and what their operations looks like, but I can certainly touch base with her and report back to this committee at our next meeting.
okay. and
Okay.
Full disclosure, I voted against it because it's not gonna have washroom, it's not gonna have
Yeah,
air
yeah.
conditioning, it's just gonna,
They're going to just do the floor so that people
Yeah.
can walk properly and a set of steps.
yeah. so-
That was my understanding at the meeting in this room, actually.
And then
um,
it came to council.
But
so-
what it did trigger off was a meeting that we had, AHS at Hillary House, a Monday before last. And at that time, we had a presentation from a representative from the Ontario Heritage Trust.
Okay, and does Adam know all this?
Hmm?
Do you know all this already?
Bits and pieces, I'd say, John. I don't know who you spoke to directly at the trust.
I forget his name.
Yeah.
I recognize his face, but it was over the internet. It was
Okay, virtual meeting.
face to face, as it were. But at the time, one of the questions that was asked was, knowing where the Patch House is located, and it's been moved several times, and I know this question has come up on numerous occasions, which was, is it viable ever that the Patch House could be moved to the Hillary House property? So combining heritage buildings all in one site. So from visitors' point of view and so on, and usability, it could still be used as a wedding venue. It could be used for teaching children in the summertime, a vegetable patch outside, etc.
Oh, John, I'm going to suggest that Adam absorb that, but he is under a council motion at the moment to do so, but it
So
looks very interesting and it can
It's
be
before the
moved.
courts, is it?
Well,
Hey, well, you'll fill us in on feedback.
yes, and through you, Mr. Chair, I mean, council did vote to approve the improvements to Patch House in
Yes,
situ,
yes.
right? So I think that is the
Yeah,
decision
that's
that's been made,
sure.
right? In terms of a potential relocation after that point, if that's something that council wants to consider, we can look at that and speak to Robin's group about that. It hasn't been contemplated yet.
Yeah, it'd be a matter of getting staff over there, but apart from that, nobody, we've tried to do all kinds of things with
Mhm.
this and nobody wanted it. So that's why we're here. So
Yeah.
good, we can explore that at the next meeting.
No, and I presented to council about a good 2 years ago or more, and it's still, they didn't say no, but they didn't say yes. So
Well,
I'm
they
just
seem to have
wondering.
forgotten about it.
Anyway,
Okay, well, we'll see what we can do. And you have new business.
I'm not sure if this is new business, but I just wanted to circle back on an item that we discussed. Christopher Watts did a presentation on the salvage program, if everyone remembers, before the new year.
Mhm.
And an idea popped in my head a couple weeks ago about, the difficulties of, location and storage.
Right.
And I was driving by industrial and, Town of Aurora has this beautiful works yard there. And I said to myself, I said, what would it take for us to get just even a storage container? Like you can get them for $5,000 or $6,000 and use that as the
Would that be
architectural.
Viable to preserve everything?
That's the
They're-
question, yeah.
They're waterproof. Like we don't really, I think that presentation probably brought more questions than
For sure, yeah.
answers because I think it was at the old storage yard on near the U-Haul there. I can't remember the street. That building is no longer being used and so we don't really know what happened with the salvage program.
Right.
Would that be an option? A storage container?
Scanlon Court.
Yes, so.
Scanlon
It
Court.
used to be a
Scanlon Court.
library.
Right, yeah, right. So through you, Ms. Chair. So first and foremost, the salvage program, again, the storage of items is to be a last resort. Like through our previous meeting, like I think it was made clear that our focus needs to be on salvaging on site.
Sorry.
It's only it really should only be in very exceptional circumstances that we have a, really distinct architectural feature that it cannot, for whatever circumstances, be reused on that site and it needs to be saved. I believe we do already have space for those instances, right? In a climate controlled manner, in a way that will preserve that feature in its best shape. And again, that's not necessarily going to be our first option, just to store and salvage at large, because our first choice will always be to reuse on site. I don't know all the details, but I do believe a storage container was used at some point in the past. But then a lot of the items, due to largely some of them not even being heritage specific to begin with necessarily, your generic doors or windows or whatever it may be, but they were subject to then deterioration just over time because of a lack of turnover, lack of, getting that product back out there in a suitable and timely manner, and they just sit. So we have to be cognizant of some of these issues that a program like that naturally does bring. And that, full circle here brings us back to the point that reuse on site, and as a committee, if we see an application that any heritage impact assessment that I receive through a heritage permit application, I'm always requiring the consultant to recommend items that are salvaging, and we have the opportunity to, review the application and recommend items that are salvaging on site as well. That should be our first step. And then if there are opportunities that need to be explored after that, we can consider those as well. And we are prepared with the facility space we have already. Yeah.
We didn't have that much stored at the library, but around maybe 2016, or but we gave away a lot. There were a lot of doors that weren't heritage, and we gave a lot of those away.
Yeah, that's true.
But there wasn't a lot of really good stuff upstairs. So that's all stored for now, is what you're saying correctly?
So through you, Ms. Chair, at our discussion, there's a distinction between the museum collection and the salvage program.
Oh, okay.
The salvage program materials were given away,
Okay.
and there haven't been a collection since that time.
Okay,
A receipt
so
of new items since that time.
So the museum collection is taking care of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, as a separate from the salvage.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For sure.
That, and who knows that's a very big, it's called the Joint Operations Center. It's a very big building, and thanks to John Abel, we prepared for a third floor. And just in case we would need it in the future, and it's come in very handy. So is that where everything is stored
Again, through you, Madam Chair, we currently do not store any salvage materials. They're all given away. But in the event, oh, sorry, that's separate. Yeah, I can't speak to the museum stuff.
Oh, okay. Where is our museum?
So the items from the salvage collection that were formerly part of the museum all went through the accession process, which means they were formally documented, given an object ID number, and they became part of the museum collection. Some of those materials are in our collection storage units, some are on display. If you've been to the new exhibit, the Englehurst doors, those were technically
The doors, those beautiful doors, they're at the
in the
cultural center upstairs.
Yeah. So
Upstairs.
through you, Ms. Chair, whatever had an object ID number and was formerly accessioned as part of the museum collection came to the museum. Anything that didn't go through the accession process was left behind as part of the salvage collection.
Are you saying it's succession? Is that the?
Accessioned, yeah. So that's when we go through the process of accepting a new donation into the collection. It's given a number. And every item in that donation is given a third decimal point to inventory the donation. And then it's cataloged and documented.
Thank you. And something. This is going to be a great committee. Are you going to be able to join us in person sometime, Cynthia? Fantastic. I'm really.
I usually am there in person.
Yeah.
Well, it's a good night to be home.
Sorry to interrupt, Madam Chair. I just have one last order of new business just for the committee's information. Wooden plaque was just received, or given, I should say, to the Johnson family at 71 Connaught, and has been installed as well. So if you're driving by.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah.
So it's officially designated.
It is, correct.
And we could go through that as an agenda item for the new members about, and a refresher?
Process, yeah, right now if you want, or at our next meeting. Whatever you need, yeah, or
Do it next.
even Chris as a new member, or member two, I mean,
Mhm.
you have my number too, and we can speak offline anytime too.
Nice to have it as a part of the
For
agenda.
the next meeting,
Yeah,
absolutely.
I think so. And also, if we ever have a meeting that's really not very full,
Right,
that the Pet
Absolutely.
Cemetery movie is, how long is it?
To you, Madam Chair, it's 34 minutes. I did want to invite all members of the committee to the next showing. We will be showing it again at Town Square.
Oh,
And I'll have seats set aside for each.
to us personally here.
Yeah, we did,
that's what the offer was.
we
but
did
then
extend that, and we can arrange that as well
so
through Adam.
through Mr. Chair, the previous term, it was offered and it was explored that essentially a screening here, but the committee decided that they would prefer to go to the performance hall. Yeah.
Is it March 23rd,
Yes.
2:00?
So through you, Ms. Chair, I will have seats set aside for everybody from the committee who would like to attend.
So we couldn't arrange it at for a future date that would coincide with a committee meeting?
Again, through you, Mr. Chair, the previous committee decided they wanted it specifically at the performance hall. That was
Yeah,
offered.
I know, but like
A second one?
on a date when we have already, I mean, everybody's really busy. If I,
This has been in the committee's calendar since last term because it was brought up and it was discussed.
and
I understand
I'm
though,
done.
but yeah, I'm indifferent. It's
No, that's
I know.
fine. I just was,
yeah.
everybody's busy, so.
And actually, March, the showing would be
March
before our
20th.
next meeting.
There you go.
March
Yes.
23rd, you said.
Yeah,
So this is Sunday.
it's a Sunday, 2 p.m. Free
Are we
pop-
allowed to bring family to that?
I'm sorry, I didn't understand what you said.
Sorry, are we allowed to bring family to that? Like if we'd like to bring
I would
family or
think
friends?
absolutely. On a Sunday, absolutely.
Yes.
Where is it being
Wonderful,
held?
thank you.
At
Performance
the
hall.
town square.
Performance
Town
Center
Square.
at the town square.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
It's not, how old are your children? Are you bringing children, Cynthia?
My oldest is 21 and my youngest is 11.
Yeah.
And I have 2 in between, so I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, that's appropriate.
Thank you.
Okay. Wow. Okay, everybody, I have to do anything else. Adjournment. May I have a motion to adjourn? And you two guys are going to adjourn. We have a mover and a seconder. All those in favor? We have to have your names on the agenda. But we
You
have
bet. Yeah. Very good,
And
very good.
Bye, everybody. Have a wonderful evening. We'll see you next
Oh,
Bye,
month.
Cynthia.
Bye.
Bye-bye.